mics.
Right.
So it's all just land, fake grass.
Yeah, yeah. That's one of those things. I haven't figured out what to do about that.
Well, get into Congress and charge market rates. Absolutely, if you want to make money, if you're the federal government, you owe a bunch of money, start charging market rate. Charge for what it's worth.
For everything.
Absolutely. And they're stealing from the public. It's a handful
Mic
of
check,
people,
mic
especially
check,
guys.
1, 2, 1, 2.
The people who really make me mad are like Bundy and those guys. Then they don't even pay $1.50, right? Like, really, guys? Oh, man. I can't believe they got off for occupying Malheur.
Yeah.
That was just...
Are they retrying them?
I don't think so. I think it's on appeal, I think. I mean, once you're
In the
it's got to be like a... No, it'd be the 9th, right? It's Oregon.
Oh, aren't they trying them again in
Oh, the 10th?
Nevada?
Oh, well, Nevada's still the 9th.
Is it?
Yeah.
Should know that.
That's okay.
How are you doing?
I lost track of that. So the news today, though, that just came out, they
had the right size notebook tonight.
Okay. So do we need to eat these mics, Kev, or
No.
are they...
The game structure on the mic is actually pretty big, so it's going to pick you up just fine, but we're really quick going to go through. I just want you to say your name. Brennan, can you check levels on mics? Ladies and gentlemen of the audience, if you wouldn't mind being quiet for just a few minutes while we do a mic check. Beth, do you want to give us a mic check on you first?
Mic check. 1, 2, 3, 4. This is Beth Sabo,
Beth
Greater
is
Montana
good.
Foundation.
John Heenan, please.
Mic check, mic check. This is John Heenan.
Okay. John Meyer.
Hi, I'm John Meyer. Do we have any more water?
Okay. Is he good? Yeah. Okay. Jared.
Hello, this is Jared Pettinato. The wind in the trees. Just so you guys heard it the first now.
Good. Pull him. Okay, Jared, could you talk again, please?
Sure, yeah, how's this?
Okay.
Sound good.
Grant.
Mic check, mic check. This is Grant Keir.
Just a little.
It's gonna ring.
Okay, that's fine.
Talk, Grant.
I can speak louder if you'd like.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay. Kathleen.
Mic check, Kathleen Williams.
Okay. Answer.
Welcome to the second Greater Montana Foundation primary candidate debate.
Keep going.
Okay, we'll keep going like this. Tonight we have guests.
Okay. Cool. So, ladies and gentlemen, your mics are hot. They'll be hot most of the night. Don't say anything you wouldn't want your mother to hear in the church. When you are asked a question, your natural tendency is to turn to the person who asked the question or is talking to you and answer it. That means your mics will not pick you up and the audience online will not be able to hear you. We are going live to the radio stations, so please talk forward into your mics. I will give you this note probably 3 more times tonight because everybody forgets it. It's okay. We're not going to lose you completely. It's just going to go a little bit softer than you probably want to be. It sounds better when you're looking forward. Also looks better. We will be having breaks. We're going to go through the rundown. You'll know exactly how everything works, but basically I'm in charge of timing, so keep your eyes on me. I will give you a notice when you are at 15 seconds, 5 seconds, and to stop. So just wrap up. If you go beyond that, I have to push the table over, come up and take it. So, okay? Smile and have fun. And I think that's it. Rundown. Brennan, are we ready to go live in 3?
I'm live.
Okay, cool. So we're already live on the web. The reason we're live right now is for the radio stations to check the audio levels, get everything going in on their end. In about 12, 15 minutes, we're going to go actually and start this thing. In the meantime, if you want to get up and walk around, you're more than welcome to. I'll give you a 5-minute call when you need to be back.
Thank you.
Sitting down. We're 17. So we're good.
I know we shouldn't have to move it, right?
No, I'm just moving it so it's a little bit
Yeah,
more to catch up.
yeah.
That's
Okay.
all right. 10 minutes? Yeah, you guys have 10 minutes. You can get up and go.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And they give you the rundown all the time, so you know all that. Yeah?
Timing?
for how it's going to work. You did ask a question.
Yeah. We got 1 minute.
To answer. Everybody else gets 30 seconds to reply. If you don't answer it well, they may give you another 30 seconds to complete.
Got it.
And then
If you fail to answer. Yes.
So it was
yeah, that's a nice way. And we will make sure that you're full of water. We have a
Thank
couple
you.
of breaks that happen. There are 2 minutes on life. Free to spend my time on that.
Okay.
What's the total length then?
and my case is
90 minutes?
yeah, we'll be done last time to get back to my took a long time. At least 8 of that time.
Well done.
Yes.
You were in DC.
It's
Where
important.
you go watch them. You can go watch
Natural resources. What are you guys doing?
So it's
Division, natural resources.
environment and natural resources division. And the natural resources section. Should we go on sections? Because there's environmental defense, environmental enforcement, there's law and policy, there's wildlife and natural resources. Indian resources. I think we had almost 4 people join us. Most of those were yes.
You guys can all see this.
Yeah. I can.
Yeah. They say reserved. I don't know why they say reserved. Actually, those are the ones that are open.
How you doing? All right. I follow directions.
How come they say reserved if they're open?
Or are they open?
Oh, okay. I was just confused. Another debate. I have a hook. It's badly How are you? Oh no, I'm just the timer. The ones that still have reserved on them haven't been cleared by people that were invited, so you're still sitting there. You just confirm it was sitting there.
Oh.
Yeah. Yes.
Judy was
Yes.
So the only one I'll need is I'll need the coastal question, just to make sure.
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah, you got it.
Okay, yeah, I'm sure.
So, when we talk, are we going to be standing up, or what's the deal?
Just right here, just like this. Do you want to try and swivel around a little bit more? So that you're not...
And do we have to lean in?
No, he said the mic right there should pick you up.
All right, good.
You shouldn't have to touch the mic. Which is also, you shouldn't touch the mic. Ladies and gentlemen, we are at 8 minutes. Come at 5. No, we're at 8. Sorry, I was answering a question. What? We are at 8 minutes, and you come in at 5. Which is 3 minutes away.
Good.
How are we supposed to signal follow? We just do it. Just like this.
That's what I was doing last time, the Ron swivel finger. I guess, yeah, what's more important is he knows that we don't want to follow up since we're not backing away.
Mike, I'll follow board.
I think so, but I don't know.
Okay. All right, that sounds good, yeah. I think that, I think we want to follow up, and we'll just jump right in. And if we don't, we'll just give a little head shake or something, yeah. Okay.
Oh, I have mine this time.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. That's probably not a bad idea though.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are at 5 minutes. If we could have the candidates to the stage. At this time, I would like you all to pull out your phones, any electronic devices. Please turn them off. This includes pacemakers. Is there loud? There will be a couple of times when applause is appropriate. I'll leave that. Feel free to join in. Other than that, when we go to a break, you guys can talk the rest of the time. Please remember that the mics are live and we'll pick up anything you say. Ron?
So everyone understands the format. I will explain once we get started. The format will be, once Bill does his introduction, I'll introduce the candidates, I'll introduce our panelists, and then we'll ask a question. Beth will start to ask a question of John. He'll have 60 seconds to answer that question. If she would like a follow-up, she has the opportunity to ask for a 30-second follow-up. So she'd ask you again, we'll explain that in a little more detail. You'd have 30 seconds again, Kevin's timing. Once that is done, then we'll go down the line in order, and the candidates will all have 30 seconds for their response and follow up to the question that was asked out of the first original candidate. We'll go through that process. If we get into a time situation, well, we're short on time to catch a break, so the sweep through would take 3 minutes and 30 seconds. If we only have 2 minutes before a break, we'll go into what I refer to as a speed round or a follow-up round. At that point, Beth and Mike will ask a question directly of one candidate. That candidate only will have 30 seconds to answer. And then we'll rotate back and forth until we're out of time and have to get to our break. Or to end. At the end of the evening, we'll end with a 60-second why on the candidate launch tennis should support by each candidate to wrap up the evening. So that's how it all works out. And that's how the timer moves. Okay?
When you only have 30 seconds, you will only be alerted to when you are at 15, 5, and stop. If you're in the minute, you will get a 30, 15, 5, and stop.
And at a stop, I will say thank you and your name. If you continue to go, I will then call on the next person and the mic will be cut off. The politeness is,
Serious.
thank you, Mr. Meyer. Can you keep going on?
Body slam us.
No, that's just all.
That's what I do. And I'm big enough. It ends badly for everyone. We are at 2 minutes.
I'm just gonna lurk. Lurk over our shoulder.
Wait till he gets done. I don't want to be on camera when I start, you know. Say there's a Butte guy, we're in trouble.
Something sounds. Oh, Jerry, don't tap your pen on the mic. Just in case.
We're watching you.
How do you know it's you?
Big Brother's watching. Nobody
It's okay to sneak in a quick thanks to everybody for coming out tonight.
Sure.
Thanks, everybody, for coming out tonight.
We're at 30 seconds. You're at 15 seconds. 5, 4, 3.
Welcome to the second Greater Montana Foundation debate and discussion program with Montana primary election candidates. Tonight, our guests are Democrats vying in the June 5th primary election to challenge incumbent U.S. Representative Greg Gianforte in the November general election. I'm Bill Whitsett, chairman of the Greater Montana Foundation, and we hope that you find our program to be of value. As with the recent Republican U.S. Senate primary program, with this one we work to fulfill our GMF vision and mission statement. That is, to benefit the people of Montana by encouraging communication with an emphasis on electronic media, on issues, trends, and values of importance to present and future generations of Montanans. And once again, we're coming to you from the Montana Historical Society Museum studio that's named for our founder, Ed Craney. A portrait of Ed is behind me tonight. Ed was a pioneer Montana broadcaster. He was a philanthropist. He believed strongly in excellence in broadcasting, and of course, he loved Montana. Today, we continue to live by the principles that Ed espoused and lived by, and that are part of our vision and mission statement. Now, here's our moderator, our GMF Vice Chairman, Ron Davis. Ron?
Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Let's meet the candidates for tonight's debate. First, John HEENAN. John is fighting for working Montanans his entire professional life. A graduate of the University of Montana, John worked as an over-the-road truck driver, a forklift operator, and then returned to Missoula for law school. While representing students in landlord-tenant cases, John decided that he wanted to be the kind of lawyer that fights for people against powerful interests. John specializes in protecting Montanans from predatory banks and insurance companies. He and his wife Megan, a school teacher, and their 4 children live in Billings. They own and operate a nearby restaurant. Grant Kyer is a former executive director of 2 separate Montana land trusts, where he worked with rural Montana farmers and ranchers to expand access to public lands and promote agricultural land. He was trained as a scientist who worked as a well site geologist on natural gas rigs, and also as engineering geophysicist. Grant is a proven bridge builder with experience working across the rural and urban divide, and is focused on delivering results for Montana. John MEYER is a graduate from the University of Montana with a degree in biology and Spanish before working for the Flathead National Forest. He received his law degree with honors from Vermont Law School. John founded Cottonwood Environmental Law Center and has won some important cases in Montana, such as stopping the construction of a $550 million coal railroad that would have taken farmers' land in southeastern Montana. John is a hunter, a climber, skier, mountain biker, and public lands attorney. Jared PETTINATO was born and raised in Whitefish to a railroad family. Montanans taught him their values, like hard work, helping your neighbors, and pitching in for the community. He took those values to the U.S. Department of Justice, where he served for 9 years defending our public lands here in Montana and throughout the United States. The U.S. trusted him with $16 billion of projects that include Forest Service projects, wind farms, highways, and public rails. Jared currently runs Citizens for Constitutional Integrity, a constitutional law nonprofit. Kathleen Williams is the only congressional candidate with elected experience. She served 3 terms as a state legislator, where she was the top Democrat on the House Taxation and Agriculture Committees. While in the legislature, Kathleen voted to expand Medicaid topped insurance companies or stopped them from denying life-saving cancer care, and fought for fair insurance pricing for middle-class Montanans. Kathleen lives in Bozeman. When she's not on the campaign trail, she's hunting, fishing, skiing, or mountain biking. Now let's meet our panelists tonight. Asking the questions will be Beth Sabo. Beth is a news and public affairs producer for Montana PBS. She is an Eastern Montana native, raised in Sydney, and graduated top of her class from the University of Montana, Missoula, with degrees in broadcast journalism and political science. Before joining Montana PBS, Beth spent 8 years with MTN News as an anchor, reporter, and producer for KBZK TV in Bozeman. Her toughest conversations, though, are usually while negotiating with her 6- and 3-year-old children. Mike Dennison is a chief political reporter for the Montana Television Network, which includes 9 stations across our state. He is covering the U.S. Senate race for MTN and the House of Representatives race, and has been covering Montana politics and full-time for the last 26 years, both for television and newspaper. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you.
Again, we'll start this evening with questioning of our candidates. Beth will start out with the first question of a candidate. The candidate will be given 60 seconds to respond to her question. After that point, she could actually push for a follow-up of 30 seconds. If we get through there, then the other candidates will each have 30 seconds to respond to Beth's question. Then we'll move down the line in order of our candidates. As we get done in the evening, each candidate will then have 60 seconds to tell Montana why they're the candidate that should represent the Democratic Party in the election. Also, if we are running short on time, we will go to what we refer to as a speed round, where one of our questioners will ask a candidate a direct question. That candidate will have 30 seconds to respond. At the end of that, we move on to an additional candidate. So we'll get things started this evening as Beth asks her first question of John Heenan.
Thanks, Ron. Mr. Heenan, good evening.
Good evening, Beth.
So you're calling for a healthcare system of government-run, taxpayer-funded health insurance for everyone, Medicare for everyone. Isn't that a political non-starter? And how are we going to achieve or pay for such a dramatic shift from the status quo?
Quite the opposite. I think it is a absolutely fundamentally necessary political starter. Every day, the public, Republican, Democrats, Independents, become increasingly disgusted, frankly, with our current healthcare system. And the ACA, while it, took us so far, the reality is that's a bill that was written fundamentally by health insurance lobbyists, by pharmaceutical company lobbyists, and it bakes in corporate welfare for those industries. And we, the healthcare consumers, are suffering. And so, going to a system that eliminates corporate welfare will save the American public over $500 billion every year. So to me, the question isn't how can we, the question is how can't we, given how broken our healthcare system is.
And how would you propose paying for Medicare for all?
Easy. If you look at our tax structure over the last 20 years, what's been happening is frankly a war on the middle class, where those at the upper tax bracket have been paying less and less as a percentage of their taxes, and all of that's been borne on the middle class and lower middle class. And so reinstituting tax fairness, making sure that people that are making millions of dollars a year pay their fair share, and eliminating all the waste that exists in our current healthcare system.
Mr. Meyer.
If the Democrats want to take this U.S. House seat back, we need to think about how conservatives think about health care. When I talk to conservatives, they say we don't want health care for everybody. We don't mind a marketplace. We like marketplaces. We like to choose, but what we want is a nonprofit system. We don't think that health care providers should be for profit, because these guys have an incentive to deny health care coverage and then pay their CEOs millions of dollars. So we bring back Obamacare, make it all nonprofit.
Mr. PETTINATO.
Americans deserve affordable health care. I want to make everyone's lives better tomorrow. I don't want to wait. And right now, people are feeling squeezed because healthcare costs are rising and their wages are not. We can price prescription drugs here in America equal to the lowest price in developed nations to bring those costs down and to use the market and competition and fix that market failure. We can also give people $200 for joining the Affordable Care Act.
Mr. Keir? I do worry that Medicare for All is a political non-starter, and I think right now there is will on both sides of the aisle to make changes. Everybody knows the system is broken. What I've been most surprised by is that most people don't realize that Medicare for All is not, in fact, Medicare as we know it for everyone, and it involves a major restructuring that I think will take enormous amount of political will, and I don't think this administration would be supportive. It also comes up $1.5 trillion shy every year on funding as proposed, and I think that's a major problem right now.
Ms. Williams?
So I do worry that it's a political non-starter, and for just that reason, because I have had success on healthcare legislation in the Montana legislature, part of our proposal, which is very specific, it's online, our healthcare proposal, is to allow people 55 and older to buy into Medicare and use that as a national platform to foster a grassroots demand for a public option.
Mr. Meyer, good evening. You are the founder of the Cottonwood Environmental Law Center, as we said at the start of the show, and whose lawsuit, or one of whose lawsuits, led to a decision that both Republicans and Democrats have tried to undo because it's been said it may delay forest plans in some way. Is that the person that Democrats want as their nominee, someone who can be held up as the poster boy for so-called environmental extremism?
I'm not the person the Democrats want. I'm an independent. And I believe that the Forest Service should listen to their biologists. The entire Cottonwood case arose because the government didn't listen to their biologists. It arose from political interference. So if I'm elected, I say we give the biologists some room and let them make the choices instead of having politicians play biologists.
But you are running for the Democratic nomination. You say the Democrats don't want you, but you're asking Democrats to vote for you. So, given your profile, why should they?
I think the Democrats need an independent thinker, someone who's not scared of their own shadow.
Mr. Pettinato?
I served 9 years at the U.S. Department of Justice defending our public lands here in Montana and throughout the United States. I'm familiar with that case. And it used the Endangered Species Act. It required the Forest Service to redo all of its forest plans. I've worked with the Forest Service, I've worked with the BLM, I've worked with a lot of the agencies to implement these projects. And we are behind on what we need to get done. We need to make it easier for them to get the work done. We need to give them the resources that they need to do it.
Mr. Keir? As the only scientist in this race, I do think Democrats are looking for somebody who appreciates and understands the importance and power of science in decision-making, but also has the experience of working in collaborative partnerships from the ground up that actually reach natural resource decisions and policies that can move forest plans forward and also communities forward on their goals with their forests.
Well, as someone who has a bachelor's of science and a master's of science, I'm not sure you're the only scientist on the panel. We do need to work on forest health issues. We need to foster collaborative stewardship and ensure that our forests remain healthy in the long run. I would agree with John that we do need independent thinkers. We need people that are not beholden to special interests in Congress, and we need folks that can get elected by independents, progressives, and moderates.
Yeah, I see public lands as a dark money issue, as we all sit here and go, how come Washington doesn't work for us? The reality is it works really well for corporate lobbyists back in Washington, D.C., especially when they have a happy ear of someone like Representative Gianforte, who makes decisions that affect all of our public lands based on nothing other than what corporate lobbyists tell them to do. We've had no input, no ability. So on May 10th, we're doing a town hall in Billings to let the public be able to talk about it.
Mr. Pettinato, welcome.
Thank you.
You are a relative political newcomer. You're perhaps not as well known as others who are running in this primary. So realistically, how do you hope to be a factor in the primary, and how could you hope to defeat Congressman Gianforte?
I'm no newcomer to Montana Democratic politics. I started in 2000 working for Brian Schweitzer in his run against Conrad Burns. I volunteered for Democrats for years, and I've been involved in Montana Democrat politics for quite a while. I didn't jump in particularly late. I think that I have made a lot of progress in getting my name out. I walk around, I know a lot of Montanans. A lot of Montanans know my family. And I've given out 15,000 business cards because I think the power of ideas are going to move Montana forward. I think we can bring money and jobs to Montana with the wind and the trees. We can make money out of thin air with wind energy in eastern Montana. And we can use the money that grows on trees to manage the forests and to reduce high-severity wildfires. This will bring jobs and money in, and that's what people want. That's going to grow their income so that they can afford more freedom and expand Montana and build Montana for the future.
Thank you, Mr. Kerr. I, for one, am quite proud to be a relative newcomer to partisan politics. I think what we need right now is people who have real-life experience, who have a proven track record for service in their communities, who care and have demonstrated that care about respecting everyone in this state and working closely with people to help achieve their goals. I think part of what motivated me to run is that I think we need new faces in politics on all sides of the aisle. We need to bring more personal experience and professional experience into politics in Montana and in the country.
Ms. Williams.
I think we do need experience, especially with a Congress that is so close to broken that it's terrifying. So someone that can hit the ground running in Congress that has policy experience, I think is very valuable, as well as being an independent thinker. Look at the Democrats that have been successful in Montana. Senator Tester, former state legislator, middle of the road, roll up the sleeves problem solver. Steve Bullock, outspent, experience, former AG. Those are the kinds of candidates we need. Policymaking is an art, and you need experience.
Mr. HEENAN.
I'm the street fighter in this race. Things that I hold very dear, I don't want to compromise away. The public education that affects my children, our public lands that affect all of us in Montana, our social security, our very democracy are all under threat. These are fine people, but I'm the candidate that can win in November.
Mr. Meyer.
I was a student senator at the University of Montana. I started a student group that took over the president's office at the University of Montana. Several students got arrested, and then we got the university to break its contract with Russell Athletic Wear for labor violations. Since then, I've been working very hard to represent various nonprofit groups across the state of Montana to protect biologists, to protect the hardworking people in Montana.
Mr. Kerr, good evening. Now, your career, as you mentioned, has been one of working for land trusts, both in Missoula and Hamilton. Are Republicans going to label you the greenie from Missoula? Isn't that a recipe for getting crushed in November?
I mean, I'm sure that there will be an effort to label me that way, and I think my track record will speak for itself. For more than 10 years now, I have left my home in Missoula to go out into rural communities in Montana and build respectful and trusting relationships with farm and ranch families, community members who own small businesses. And in that work, I have dedicated myself to service that helps communities thrive and invest in public lands and outdoor recreation. I've helped farm and ranch families expand their businesses. I've helped young beginning farmers get access to the land for the first time. And I've worked with sportsman groups to make sure that we have a chance to embrace and further our outdoor legacy in Montana. I think those are core Montana values that, that all Montanans share and would like to see furthered into the future and protected for future generations.
Ms. Williams.
I think beating Greg Gianforte in his own backyard is a great idea, and I think running from Bozeman or campaigning from Bozeman is a great place to campaign from. It's an economic powerhouse. I think there are some risks when you move farther west for candidates. I will say that I am so honored that I have progressives, independents, and moderate Republicans supporting our campaign. So that's what we need to win.
Mr. HEENAN.
Yeah, after the last special election, a prominent Republican said if the Democratic Party wanted to actually pick up this seat, they'd run somebody from Yellowstone County. 1 out of every 7 voters is there. It's where statewide elections are won and lost. I happen to reside in Yellowstone County. My friends on this stage all live in Bozeman or Missoula. I've also fought for working Montanans. and I'm a small business owner, which is just a different background. So nobody will be, have anything to say about any of that.
Mr. Meyer, would you like to respond to the question?
For some reason, I thought I started out answering the question.
I think it was to Mr. Keir about him
Keir
being,
started this one.
about his background in Missoula, and whether being labeled a greenie or environmentalist would be a damning thing in the general election.
So I think whether you're labeled a greenie or not is not going to matter. I think if you speak from your heart, you can win and you can beat Gianforte.
Mr. Pettinato, would you like to respond?
Depending on who we pick, well, no, regardless of who we pick, we're going to hear the words socialist and liberal over and over again. And the question is, which candidate are those labels going to stick to? And a couple people up here, it's going to stick to them pretty well. I love Missoula. I went to the University of Montana. But I can't remember the last time that we elected a Democrat statewide from Missoula. And that's a big issue that we as Democrats need to think about as we move forward.
Ms. Williams, on gun violence, you said you want to regulate AR-15s like we do machine guns, and that you're not afraid of getting an F rating from the NRA. Please explain what that means for AR ownership and sales, and doesn't the stand make you a target and perhaps easier to beat up on in the general election?
I think that children deserve to feel safe at school. And I think parents deserve to have their kids come home safe from school. There have been too many massacres, and the last 6 have been performed with an AR-15. I think it's time that we have an adult conversation about drawing a bright line between legitimate hunting firearms, which I own several, and weapons for killing. And I am not afraid to stand up, and many of the people that I talk to, sportsmen and women, they're in the same place. If it's the opportunity to own a weapon like that versus our children's safety, they pick children's safety all the time, and I'm not afraid of it.
So what is it you're saying we should do about AR-15s or so-called assault rifles in terms of the actual regulation of them that you think is proper?
So they should only be used in a controlled environment like machine guns are today. So if you want to shoot one of those weapons, you can go to West Yellowstone, you can go to Las Vegas where they advertise shoot a machine gun, and you can go do that. So that's the proposal.
Mr. HEENAN?
We have 33,000 Americans dying every year as a result of gun violence. That's almost 100 Americans a day. I see our failure to pass meaningful gun legislation as a dark money issue also. We have politicians, including our own representative, who make decisions based on what the gun lobby tells him to do, and we need to elect people that are willing to make common sense decisions. So that's where I stand on it, but where I'm at is we need to focus on keeping guns out of the hands of people that want to do harm.
Mr. Meyer?
Grant told me a few weeks ago if he wanted to support me, if I wanted his support, I shouldn't cost as much. And so, Grant, I might upset you here, but I hunt. I have a 30-06. I kill deer and elk with that. If you need a semi-automatic rifle to hunt, you're a bad shot. If you want a semi-automatic rifle to have fun, I think you should stop being such a selfish bitch and think about somebody else.
Mr. Pettinato?
My heart broke for the kids in Parkland, and it still breaks. We have a very deep culture of freedom in Montana and the freedom to own guns, and we need to balance those freedoms against the freedom to send your kids to school and to make sure that your kids feel safe when they're at school. So we need to do more. What we've done isn't enough, but we've got a lot of steps that we need to take in the meantime. We need to enforce the gun laws we have, stop withdrawing them. We need more research. We have a lot of work to do.
Yes, my daughter's actually been in lockdown on her school, so I understand exactly what this is like as a parent, and I have met with students across the state. Our students have very creative and thoughtful and practical ideas that fall very short of assault weapons bans on ways to make their school safer. For example, in Helena, all they want right now is school safety officers who are school resource officers who are there full-time instead of part-time. I think we have a long way to go to achieve a lot of the goals that these students are asking for right away, and we can do it practically.
Thank you.
Mr. Heenan, you were one of the lawyers representing the Sierra Club and the Environmental Information Center's 2013 lawsuit that ended with a settlement shutting down Colstrip power plants 1 and 2 by 2022. Won't that be a damaging fact that will be used against you relentlessly in the general election if you're the nominee?
I don't think so at all. You know, my background, and I've been unabashed about it, is I stand up for people against corporations that violate the law. And the circumstances of that case was there was a corporation that couldn't comply with the Clean Air Act. And so I was happy to bring that case and participate in it in an effort to get the corporation to comply with the Clean Air Act. They chose, frankly, to do a hook slide and you know, use it as an opportunity to stop doing business in Colstrip. I've been in Colstrip a lot of times. I'm working really hard to get labor support. I've been spending a lot of time in that community because I want people to know that I do care tremendously about Colstrip and everyone in Montana.
Given that fact, how do you propose connecting with perhaps moderate Democrats or other people who live in rural Montana, rural eastern Montana, who depend on jobs like a coal mine that use natural resource extraction?
Yeah, I want more people to have $80,000 a year jobs, not less, and that's been my platform from the beginning. I've spent a ton of time in eastern Montana. My platform is one of kitchen table issues. How can we, you know, get your kids a great education, make sure that you can get a good paying job, and make sure that you have health care, and if something happens to you, you don't have to come talk to me about filing a bankruptcy. Those are the issues that unite us as Montanans and Americans, and that's what my platform's all about.
Mr. Meyer.
Part of Colstrip is owned by Northwestern Energy, which is a publicly traded utility. If someone were to file a lawsuit against Northwestern Energy for a water violation or an air violation, that would depress the stock value of Northwestern. Then you can have a hostile takeover of Northwestern Energy, get some strategic investor involved, and repurpose Colstrip and start generating manufacturing, solar and wind manufacturing.
Mr. Pettinato.
When I think about the workers in Colstrip who oppose stopping coal mining, I hear them fearing for their jobs. We need better paying jobs in Montana. Wind energy, it presents a great resource. It is what Texas is to oil and gas, Montana is to wind. I call the wind the next treasure from the treasure state. And the Colstrip folks have gotten $10 million for job training. We can expand wind energy in Montana and move them to new union jobs doing that.
Mr. Keir.
Yeah, there's no question in my mind that the greatest asset we have at Colstrip are the hardworking folks who live there and work there and take pride in providing energy for this country. I think that we need to do a good job in Congress of making sure that this state has the ability to meet its customers' demand. Our customers are demanding cleaner forms of energy. We need to work with Colstrip to make sure that we deliver that so that we have jobs not just for an election cycle, but for a generation ahead.
I do worry about skeletons coming out in this election that will force us to once again lose this seat. I'm very concerned about that. Regarding Colstrip, I think it's critical that we elect problem solvers. I've been out to Colstrip, met with all kinds of folks there, working on ideas and options for them to transition and for those jobs to maintain and ensure that that community is viable in the long run.
We have time for one quick question on the speed round. Beth, if you have a follow-up for one of the candidates, they have 30 seconds to respond.
I do, 1 moment. Mr. Meyer, I'm curious if you would expand on a proposed hostage takeover of Northwestern Energy.
Hostile takeover. So Governor Schweitzer, I believe, was involved in a hostile takeover of Stillwater Mine, and I would love to talk to Governor Schweitzer if you're ever around. And I think that we can, if you can depress the stock value of Northwestern Energy, you can take that and do a lot with Colstrip that otherwise we wouldn't be able to do. Mike, what do you?
Thank you, Mr. Meyer, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We're at a timeout as we have gone through the first half hour of tonight's discussion. We thank you for joining us all over Montana, as we're live on the internet as well on radio stations all over the state. From the Craney studio at the Montana Historical Society with the Greater Montana Foundation, our discussion and debate with the Democratic candidates who would like to be your representative to the United States Congress. We'll be back in 2 minutes. You're free for 2 minutes if you want to get up and stretch your legs, and then we'll let you. Oh, a face for radio.
Just so you know, we have to change the alarm order so you can take it alphabetically. So we'll correct it on the audio as you don't usually see the radio, so it doesn't matter. So, just so you know.
You know what's funny is when I did it, I thought, oh my God, I got this wrong.
It's okay. We'll fix it. Grant, just so you know, we'll fix the We're at 1 minute, please. Do you need water? Does anyone need water? Please. Can we get the water pitcher? You're doing a great job of talking to Mike. You're doing a great job of talking to the side. 20 seconds.
Now remember, you only get 2 minutes, so the bathroom's a long ways away.
You are at 10 seconds.
And welcome back to the Montana Historical Society in Helena, the Ed Craney studio, where the Greater Montana Foundation tonight is presenting a debate between the Democratic candidates for United States House of Representatives. We continue with Mike Dennison asking the next question.
And my question was Mr. Meyer. Mr. Meyer, you said you want to run a low-budget race. I'm wondering, how do you do that? Is it really going to work against someone like Greg Gianforte, who's going to have a war chest of several $1 million?
Is it gonna work? I've been traveling around the state, sleeping in the back of my truck. I've been making cardboard signs. Local businesses want to put the signs up that say Meyer from Montana in their storefronts. Local Montana businesses believe that you don't need a lot of money. Montanans believe you don't need a lot of money to play this game, because this is a game. My law school mentor told me that this is a rich man's game, and I don't believe that. I think that Montana's the leader, and we're going to show the rest of the country that you don't need millions of dollars. This is a great way to show the state that you don't need a lot of money. If you have a billionaire versus a public land attorney with student loans, that's a great juxtaposition that voters get to choose from.
Mr. Pettinato?
We are not going to win this race with money. Gianforte has all the money. We're going to win this race with hard work and better ideas. I'm the only candidate in the race born and raised in Montana, so I grew up on Montana values like working hard and coming up with better ideas. Gianforte, we have to take down with, we can do it. We need to bring jobs to Montana, and we need to expand freedom and get that message out, and we can do it by taking ourselves to the voters.
Here.
There's nothing I'd like more than to get money out of politics. One of the things that my wife Bex and I were most intimidated by in doing this is, can we go up against millionaire self-funders and win an election in the climate that we live in? And I think we've done a great job on my team to raise money, because the reality is we need money to be on the road and to get our message out. I think the money that we've raised across the state from people on all sides of the political aisle is a great indication of the support we've had. When I get to Congress, one of the first things I look forward to doing is working on reversing Citizens United so that we can give this seat and our politics back to people again.
We definitely need campaign finance reform, but until we can elect people that can get in there and do it, we need campaign finances. I've been so honored by the contributions that people across all of Montana and political stripes have made to our campaign. We're running a frugal one. We've got the resources we need, and it's my honor to work on that campaign. And Gianforte, you know, he lost and he outspent Bullock, so we can do it.
Mr. Heen?
Yeah, I've been in the trenches. I've been proud to represent the people of Montana, fighting politicians who took dark money. I've seen firsthand the gross playbook that is our post-Citizens United world. I'm walking the walk as a candidate. I'm not taking any corporate PAC money. I'm not taking money from corporate lobbyists. And people are stepping up. There are over 5,000 people have contributed to my race. The way we're going to beat Gianforte is all the money in the world can't buy class.
Mr. Pettinato, you talk about your plan to make money and jobs from the wind and the trees, and it sounds like a good campaign slogan. But can you tell us what concrete steps you would take to increase wind development and tree thinning projects? It can seem like a lot of moving parts.
The Public Services Commission is hurting Montana. They think that they can single-handedly save coal, but natural gas is doing a lot of the competition that's driving down price. So the Public Services Commission is actually undermining the ability to bring in wind and solar to Montana. They are making it harder to contract here, and that is a violation of their obligations under federal law. So we need to fix that first, and then we need to take advantage of our resources we have here in Montana. We need to facilitate more wind energy in eastern Montana. It's a great resource. It brings the best paying jobs in town. It brings rent for the landowner and money for the schools. On the trees side, we can make money we can use the money that grows on trees to manage forests and to reduce high severity wildfires. We want to restore fire to a natural part of the system. We caused these high severity wildfires. We burned 1.2 million acres last year and lost $240 million. We need to go into the stands that we have treated and conditioned into this, fix them, and move forward.
Can you talk more specifically about what reforms you'd like to see at the PSC?
Well, we need them to actually encourage renewable energy development. We need them to stop impeding it, as they have admitted on tape. And we might need a federal law to do that, because apparently the federal law that we have isn't enough. And we need to make sure that we take down the barriers that are stopping wind energy development here in Montana. I just looked at a map, and other states are doing this. Montana needs to do this.
Sure. I mean, there are, and there have been federal incentives to help move us forward towards renewable forms of energy in our state. I'll go back to our earlier conversation and just say that, you know, I worked in private business as an engineer. One of the things we talked about was the customer is always right. And right now, the customers that we have in Montana who want our products, our energy, are looking for cleaner forms. And I think that somebody needs to go to Congress to make sure that Montanans are best suited to deliver the product our customers are looking for, so that we do have the ability to generate energy from our natural resources in the future.
Ms. Williams?
I'm a strong proponent of alternative energy and all the benefits it can bring to Montana. And again, we need to elect problem solvers to Congress that can roll up their sleeves. My history, I drive a plug-in hybrid. I have worked on wind energy farms, tried to bring data centers here that could combine storage, wind energy, and jobs. We have lots of opportunities, and we need to work on them.
Yep. Renewable energy is the fastest developing sector of the energy market. There's more six-figure jobs coming online in that sector than in any other. Those jobs are either going to go to China or to Montana. I want them to come to Montana. And as Jared mentioned, we have politicians that are standing in the way because they're doing the bidding of corporate lobbyists. We need to elect people that don't have strings attached that'll make good decisions for Montanans.
Mr. Meyer?
I'm currently the lead attorney on a lawsuit against the Montana Public Service Commission. The lawsuit is asking the court to remove the cap on the amount of renewable energy that can be generated in the state of Montana. If I'm elected to Congress, I'd like to introduce legislation that would remove all caps across the entire United States so we can create new jobs in the energy sector all across the U.S.
Mr. Kier. President Trump remains popular in Montana, and Greg Gianforte is a big supporter of the president, voting with him almost all the time. So you're going to ask Montanans to vote for someone who opposes the president's agenda. How exactly do you think that will work?
So, I have worked really closely with people on both sides of the aisle my entire career. I am not here to push anyone's agenda but Montanans' agenda. Where there are places that Donald Trump's agenda lines up with what we're trying to do in Montana and what I think is right and what people ask me to do, I'm happy to work with him on that. I believe that he is actually working closely with Greg Gianforte to undermine a lot of the things that Montanans do value and want to see. I think the attacks on the Affordable Care Act and Medicaid expansion that are undermining the viability of our rural hospitals is a great example of that. I think our rural communities value those hospitals and they want to see a government that respects them and wants to continue to see them open and funded. I think our trade policy right now is one that Greg Gianforte is standing by and supporting, and I think it's one that jeopardizes our agricultural communities and rural landowners and really puts in jeopardy their ability to deliver their goods to market. And I think there are a number of other places where Donald Trump is not doing things that are right for Montana, and people are looking for somebody to be an independent voice to stand up to him.
Ms. Williams?
I agree with much of what has been said. I think Montanans are realizing that the leadership in Washington is not working in their interests. I was Greg Gianforte's state legislator, so I've been on his mailing list for a long time, and he keeps thanking me for helping him advance the Trump agenda. So I think tax policy, that's wrong for Montana. The health care that's coming out of Washington is wrong for Montana. The tariffs, and we need to rebuild our place in the world, and all of that needs to change.
Yeah, we only have one representative in Montana, so regardless of your political ideology, we deserve somebody that's going to represent all of us as Montanans. We have a representative who puts party over the state continually with every vote that he makes and every decision that he makes. We need someone who can work with the president when appropriate and hold the president accountable to his campaign promises, which were $1 trillion of infrastructure that hasn't materialized, a better healthcare system that hasn't materialized, and draining the swamp. This is as swampy as we've ever been.
Mr. Meyer?
I don't think that Gianforte or Trump are in touch with the American public. I think they have too much money and they don't understand us. I think it's important to put somebody in there who actually comes from a working class background that's willing to work for, work with, work hard for Montanans.
Mr. Penton?
Montanans need someone with Montana values and with the right judgment to decide when to support the president and when to oppose him and when to fight. So there are opportunities for working together, and there are times when we're going to need to take a stand. And Gianforte in particular has undermined our public land protections at every opportunity. And so a new representative would need to take the opposite tack on everything that Gianforte is doing.
Ms. Williams, you mentioned the tariffs. Trump has proposed tariffs on steel and aluminum and a whole host of products from China. Do you support any of his proposals on tariffs?
No, I don't. And I think, so I have worked much of my career with farmers and ranchers and the agricultural sector and feel quite connected and quite committed to rural Montana and to the livelihoods of folks in rural Montana. The instability that has been introduced to that sector, both through the NAFTA renegotiations or attempts at NAFTA renegotiations, the tariffs, the uncertainty with the Farm Bill, All of those are not providing the predictability that businesses need in rural Montana and in the agricultural sector. I look forward to capitalizing on those relationships that I have across Montana and working to ensure that rural Montana and our agricultural sector have predictability, safety nets, and options for diversifying their business and the related security.
Mr. HEENAN?
Yeah, our president tweeted, trade wars are good. That's not what I'm hearing as I travel around and talk to people in Montana. I spent all last week along the High Line. Here's what I'm hearing from folks. Our machinery is going to cost more money because of this trade war. We have no certainty in our ability to export our product. Agriculture is our biggest industry in Montana. We need to have reliable trade policy. And I'm a big proponent of value-added agriculture, which allows us as Montanans to control our own destiny.
Mr. Meyer?
I think that some of President Trump's tariffs offer opportunities for Montana. I think the solar tariff provides an opportunity for us to create new manufacturing jobs. We can start making our own solar panels at Colstrip, ship those across the entire U.S. and generate jobs.
This is one of those times when we need to take a stand. We need to turn back all of the tariffs. The solar panels in particular is like closing the barn door when the horse is already out. We've already lost our solar industry. If he wants to help grow jobs in America, then expand unions, because increasing tariffs and starting a trade war only hurts Montana. It only undermines our equipment prices, our beef markets, and soybean prices.
Yes, Montana farm and ranch families and our agriculture industry is already struggling right now with prices, with extreme drought, now with flooding. This is not the time to mess with international trade policy. We need more predictability, yes, and if we don't get it soon, we're going to see China and Asian markets going to Canada, Australia, South America, and Brazil to get the products that we provide here in Montana. It is imperative that somebody hold Trump accountable immediately.
Mr. HEENAN?
Yeah.
You worked on some prominent cases attacking the influence of so-called dark money. What is your fix for limiting dark money or money in general in campaigns, and what's your reasoning behind it?
Yeah, that's easy. We need to overturn Citizens United and restore sanity to our democracy and say that corporations are not people and money is not speech. And that's an issue that unites us as Montanans. I know that because 72% of us voted directly and told our elected officials to take all necessary action to overturn Citizens United. We have a senator in John Tester who's working in Congress to get it done, and we have a representative who's done nothing. And so, again, I don't care what your political ideology is. No one likes all the attack mailers, all the attack TV commercials that flood the airwaves this time of year. We need to get dark money out of politics so we can have representatives that return to representing us, not just wealthy insiders, not just corporate lobbyists.
So just to clarify, your priority would be overturning Citizens United?
Yeah, because prior to Citizens United, Congress was able to pass meaningful campaign finance restrictions and campaign finance reform. And we had the McCain-Feingold bill that was a bipartisan bill that regulated campaign finance. Now it's wild, wild west.
Mr. Meyer?
I think that too often candidates say, vote for me and I'll overturn Citizens United. Instead of waiting to get into office, I'm doing it right now. I'm not taking any political action money. I'm living out of the back of my truck when I'm on the road. I'm being very frugal. And when people hear about that, they're going to vote for me because they know that this is a grassroots effort.
Mr. PETTINATO?
The Republicans are cheating, and they are undermining our democracy. They are using Citizens United and gerrymandering and voter ID laws to try to win races that they couldn't win if everybody voted, if we expanded the franchise and made sure that people had their voice in government. We need to take back our government. We need to expand our democracy and make sure that it functions the way that our founders intended.
Yes, I actually agree wholeheartedly with John Heenan that we need to be working towards that ideal of overturning Citizens United. But in the meantime, there are practical things we can do right away to make changes. One of which, and not the least of which, is just absolute transparency in campaign contributions at every level. And we can do that with our technology so that people understand within 24 hours of a contribution who is donating and why. And that should be both on the campaign side and also to shareholders of corporations, so that as an investor, you know exactly where a corporation is putting your money.
Ms. Williams?
We do need to reverse Citizens United, but we can't wave a magic wand. It's going to take either the Supreme Court redeciding it, which is unlikely, or a constitutional amendment. So I'm all about getting that constitutional amendment going. I appreciate that. We also need to ensure that we're electing people that are not swayed by money. We keep talking about the evils of money in politics, but we need to elect people that are there as public servants.
Mr. Meyer, the number of working sawmills in Montana has dropped significantly in the last couple of decades. Do we want to increase timber harvests on national forests and have more mill workers in Montana? Is that something you would work toward or oppose as a congressman?
I think we can have more people out in the woods cutting down trees. I think that what's happened is technology has increased the amount of trees you can harvest and reduce the amount of time it takes to do that. So right now I'm working with the Beaverhead Deer Lodge National Forest. And we're drawing lines on maps to generate a timber sale. And I'm hoping to have the Crow Indians bid on that timber sale, cut all those trees down by hand, drag them out by horses, mill them locally. And I think that if we do that and go back to those days pre-Feller Buncher, we're going to generate some good sustainable jobs for communities.
And so where do you stand on the Republican efforts primarily to change the law, change various laws to make it more difficult to file civil actions involving forest plans, timber sales, et cetera?
Everyone has the right to petition the government, to petition a court to address any sort of grievance. So to the extent that Congress wants to eliminate lawsuits for nonprofit groups that think the government's violated the law, I'm certainly not in favor of that.
Mr. Pettinato?
We've created the conditions that cause high severity wildfire. And now we have an opportunity with the trees to use the money that grows on the trees to manage the forests and to reduce those high severity wildfires. For 80 years, we took out the largest trees in the forest. We suppressed all of the wildfires. And that's allowed the fuels on the ground to build up. It's allowed spindly trees to grow up. So now when the fire comes in, it burns hotter on the ground. It gets in the spindly trees and the canopy and causes high severity wildfires. In the overstock stands, we can treat, and we can use the money to clean it up and move forward and clean up our forests.
Mr. Q?
I agree with Mr. Pettinato that we do need more management, and we got to manage our way out of the problem that we got ourselves into. I think there are great family-run and locally run mills like Pyramid and Sealy Lake. I think we are not going to get out of the problem we're in without their help. What we need is solid regulations and a well-funded Forest Service with good scientists who can make sure that we're meeting the demands of those regulations and working with our private partners to reach a successful outcome on the forest.
Ms. Williams?
I believe that timber harvest is a management tool that can be used creatively to increase the health of our forests. There's some interesting things going on. There's timber harvest being planned to enhance grizzly bear habitat. There's stewardship councils, many in the Northwest, that are participating cooperatively with the forest to manage those lands and make decisions. And where there is that kind of effort, those are standing up in court.
Mr. Heenan?
Yeah, I just 2 weeks ago had the opportunity to tour the sawmill in St. Regis and meet some of the folks there. And it was really incredible to me, all the cutting-edge technology that they're using to do sustainable forestry. I think there's all kinds of opportunities. It's not an either-or between timber harvest and appropriate forest management. I think we can have both as long as we have community decision-making, not decisions being imposed by Washington, D.C. on us in Montana.
Thank you. Mike?
Mr. Pettinato, you mentioned that you're the only Montana native here among the bunch of people running for the nomination. Does that really make a difference? Is that something that people should think about or look at when they're deciding who to vote for in this primary?
I have a lot of great friends who moved to Montana. They understand the splendor. They understand the values that we have in Montana. It's, to me, being from Montana is part of who I am. I grew up here. I grew up on Montana values because Montanans taught me those values in Montana public schools. I know what it's like to go to Montana public schools. I know what it's like to drive around the state. I know what it's like to be from here. I know what it's like to go outside of Montana and people to say, I've never met someone from Montana before. I love Montana, and I'm happy to be here. I feel lucky to have been able to grow up here, and the values that I grew up with include working hard, working with your neighbors, rolling up your sleeves and digging into problems, and public service, because we send more people to the military than all states except one. So for me, those are the important values that we need to move forward here in this process.
I guess I would also ask the other candidates in their response, how they're going to respond to the charge you may hear that you're an outsider, you're a newcomer, even though you may be relatively not a newcomer. How are you going to respond to that?
Oh, I think you always have to acknowledge that you are a newcomer in Montana if your people haven't been here for 10,000 years. But I think it's really important to me, having been born in Kansas farm country and having been raised in Colorado Rockies in our forests and rivers, that no place has the things that shape me as a person and the sort of Midwest sensibilities and kind people like Montana. I feel at home here, and Montanans have welcomed me. This is where I'm raising my child, and this is home, and this is a place I want to make better every day.
Ms. Williams.
So I moved to Montana 24 years ago from Oregon, and it's the first place that ever felt like home for me. And I've really worked to serve this state in as many ways as possible ever since. And I love this state. I love every corner of it. I've hunted and worked and explored throughout the state, and it'd be my absolute honor to represent this state in Congress.
Mr. HEENAN.
So I came to Montana for college when I was 19 years old. I always tell people that the minute I got to choose, I chose Montana. I also tell people that for a lot of reasons, my wife would be a better candidate than I am. She's a fourth-generation Montanan, so my kids are fifth-generation Montanans. So at some point, we need to elect the person that we decide has our backs. And when I go to the doctor, I don't ask, wait, what state are you from? I ask, can you heal me?
Mr. Meyer.
I moved to Montana in 1999. I was born in Northwest Indiana. What I've learned since 1999 is that Montanans value hard work. My mom cut slabs of steel at the steel mill outside of Gary, Indiana. Before I went into physics class at the University of Montana, I would cut grass, I'd weed whack, so I'd walk in there with green Carhartts.
Mr. PETTINATO, would you like to respond to as an outsider or a newcomer?
Nobody's going to call me an outsider or a newcomer. Thank you.
Give you one shot at that.
I appreciate
Ladies
it.
and gentlemen, we're live from the Craney studio at the Montana Historical Society with the Greater Montana Foundation, and tonight's live debate with the Democratic candidates for United States House of Representatives. We'll be back after this. Free for 2:30.
You okay, Kevin?
Yeah, are you okay?
Yeah. What happened to the fat one? He went down. No, I just turned it up. I forgot to turn it up at the end of the break.
Mike's got this look on his eyes. His eyes are like, look at me, look at me. I had to turn away from that. I was like, oh, I know he wants me to look at her.
Big step down there, be careful. Oh my God. Those will get you in trouble.
Sorry. I'm gonna turn it back up about 10 seconds before I have to be back over there. Can you be in there and tell me if because that's all the mics at once. Jared, you okay? Yeah, I'm fine. I bounce.
We had about 20 seconds and it fell down.
Yeah, no, I understood it, but I wasn't ready for it.
Yeah, I'm sitting there thinking, should I or shouldn't I? Well, we have 20 seconds.
I just made a joke. It worked out just fine.
It was perfect. It was a great way to go out. Thank you.
So, yeah, now I'm fine.
Hello, everyone.
Is that okay? We're good? Beth, say hi.
Hello.
Do you want to hear it again?
Perfect. We are at 20 seconds.
I'd like to thank KATHLEEN for the floor show that we enjoyed last time. Rumor has it he bounces really well. So thanks, Kev.
4, 3.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Craney Studio with the Montana Historical Society in Helena as the Greater Montana Foundation presents tonight's debate between the Democratic candidates for United States House of Representatives. We continue tonight's debate with a question from Mike Dennison to Kathleen Williams. Or, excuse me, I got ahead of myself. It's to Grant Keir from Beth.
I'll take this one.
I'll give it to you.
All right. Mr. Keir, you've called for addressing climate change and place an emphasis on developing more renewable energy in Montana. I'd like to hear specifics on how you would do that, and are you proposing to move away from the development of coal, oil, and gas?
So, thank you for the question. I did work in industry in natural gas exploration. I was in Billings recently, and somebody specifically asked me, when did you change your mind? It wasn't a mind change. I understood when I did the work that climate change was real, and I believe that all forms of energy are necessary as we start in our transition, and we'll move away from some forms of energy. I think our customers are already demanding new changes on the West Coast. I think it's really important that Congress and our representative in Congress plays a role in helping ease that transition. I think the ways that we can do that are fundamentally to provide some of the same incentives that we've made in the past to solar and wind, some of that have been called back by the Trump administration. I think that specifically we need to be investing in some of the infrastructure that it's going to take to move those new forms of power to the West Coast, because they do need to be transmitted over different transmission lines. And I think it's important that we start to look at ways of incentivizing storage in our state. And there's some great pump hydro storage projects underway here that we can work at trying to incentivize.
I'm curious how you anticipate working with the current head of the EPA, who would likely disagree with much of those sentiments.
I think it's safe to assume that he would disagree with all of my sentiments, not much of them. And I do that the same way that I've worked in the past, which is demanding that we understand the facts and science, holding the administration accountable for the rules and laws that we pass in Congress. When I worked on the Farm Bill, part of that work was changing some of our provisions in the Farm Bill so that they worked better in Montana. Some of that was working with the administration so that those changes were implemented on the ground in Montana so that they worked for Montanans.
Ms. Williams.
So climate change is definitely something we need to address. It's been too long and weak in response, so I am committed to that. I've worked on the front lines of water policy in Montana, and that's where you see climate change occurring instantaneously. So we need to ensure that we're providing incentives for renewable energy. I also think there's incredible opportunity to partner with our agricultural community for carbon storage in the soil, and much more that I don't have time for.
Mr. HEENAN.
Yeah, thank you. Climate change is real, it's happening, and it's not a matter anymore of political opinion, it's a matter of scientific fact. And so how come nothing's happening? How come nothing's being fixed? Again, it's a dark money corporate corruption issue, and look no further than the head of our EPA, who on a daily basis, it's revealed that every aspect of his life is, from his housing to his what he eats for dinner, is paid for by corporate lobbyists. And we have representatives that aren't even.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Meyer.
I'd like to introduce federal legislation that removes all caps on the amount of renewable energy that can be generated, not only in Montana, but across the U.S. Everybody agrees, Democrats and independents or Republicans, everybody, that we want new jobs. We want good, clean jobs. Legislation that removes caps on the amount of renewable energy that can be generated will provide new, good, clean, high-paying jobs.
Mr. PETTINATO.
Climate change is threatening our national security. The Department of Defense recognizes that. It's threatening our cities on the coast. That will cost trillions of dollars to mitigate and to address. It threatens our outdoor recreation. I'm from Whitefish. Glacier National Park is out my back door. and we are losing the glaciers. We are losing our control over the environment. It's making wildfires hotter, it's making the ground drier, and it's pushing us in the wrong direction. We need to address it, and we need to do it now in a real big way.
Ms. Williams, how would you have voted on the Republican/Trump tax cut bill? And would you have supported it? Why or why not?
I wouldn't have supported it. In the Montana legislature, I was vice chair in 2015 of the Montana House Taxation Committee. One of the rules there was you want to try and help people with tax burdens, you got to be revenue neutral. So that rule was violated from the outset. Our representative who first went to Congress and proposed that Congress not be paid unless they pass a balanced budget, within 3 months he was supporting a tax bill that added over $1.8 trillion to the national debt, and then 2 weeks later I get a mailer about a balanced budget. We need to change our representation in Congress. We need people that can hit the ground running on tax policy, that has spent 6 years in the Montana legislature in a leadership position on tax policy. It may have put a little bit of money in some of the pockets of some low and moderate income Montanans, but it put a lot of money in the pockets of large corporations and the wealthy, and that's not the way to go.
Mr. Heenan.
Yeah, we've been watching for 3 decades now, war on the middle class, and what happened in December by those tax cuts was the next to last chapter of that war. Massive handouts for wealthy corporations, billionaires, people like our representative. Now is the final stage, which is going to be to grab that money back from people's Medicare and Social Security. We need to elect people that are going to say, over my dead body.
Mr. Meyer.
I would not have supported Trump's tax plan. We need to stop giving money to the 1%, stop giving tax cuts to the 1%. The working class and middle class in Montana are tired of getting trickled on.
Mr. Pettinato.
The tax bill took $1.5 trillion from our children and our grandchildren and gave it to rich corporations. Trickle-down economics doesn't work. We keep trying it, and it hasn't worked yet. Right now, Senator Mark Rubio of Florida, he's admitted that the corporations took the money, they had share buybacks, they did all sorts of things for rich corporations, but the money, he has seen no evidence, and there is no evidence that the money went back to the workers or it benefited the workers in any way.
Mr. Keir.
There's no evidence because there was nothing to hold them accountable. We gave corporations an enormous tax break at a time when they had record access to capital, record profits, and we did that without asking them requiring them to bring a single dollar back to the United States to invest in our factories or to invest in the wages of our workers, whose productivity has skyrocketed over the last 40 years while their wages have been stagnant. This was not a tax plan, this was a tax scam, and it will have a reckoning in 3 years when we have to pay the bill.
Mr. Heenan, you're running as a populist and a progressive. I'm curious how you think that's going to work in the general election in Montana against a conservative like Mr. Gianforte without being painted as ultra-liberal.
Well, I would call our representative an opportunist because as we've watched his political career, he sticks his finger in the air to see which way the wind's blowing. Here's who I'd say, a populist just means someone that wants to represent people, and I unabashedly want to represent people. I'm running as an FDR Democrat to represent the people of Montana. Let me tell you who ran as a populist and a general in Montana and won. Our Governor Brian Schweitzer and our President Donald Trump. And you think about Donald Trump's campaign and the promises he made to drain the swamp, stand up for people against corporations. Now, a lot of that has not borne out in his administration, but that's overwhelmingly something that Montanans value, a representative that's going to put them ahead of corporate special interests.
Other than perhaps running as a populist, are there any other characteristics you share with the president?
Well, I think, and with Representative Gianforte, I'm a successful business person. I know how to balance a budget. I know how to make payroll. And those are things that I think Montanans value in their elected officials, not someone that's just grabbing numbers out of thin air, someone that knows how to grow jobs, grow the economy, make things work.
Mr. Meyer.
Montanans want a representative that is not afraid to be himself. When I was in law school, I won a drag show. Now, I pick up roadkill raccoons and badgers, make hats. So if you want to pick up the young crowd, talk about the LGBT community, you want to pick up the hunters and the conservative crowd, you talk about the hunting.
Mr. Pettinato.
Let's be clear. The Republicans and the dark money are going to come in and they're going to call John a socialist. The question is whether that's going to stick and whether his policies are going to show that that is true. Democrats, I want you to think about how we can win this race, because we're going to need some of those people from the middle to come with us. I want you to think about your neighbors, and you got the ones you like, and you got some of those ones with the bumper stickers. And we need to bring some of those people with us if we're going to win this election and take it back for the Democrats.
Mr. Kier.
Look, Congressman Gianforte bought this seat, and he flies a private jet back and forth to D.C. so that he doesn't have to put his finger in the air and listen, and feel the wind. He doesn't listen to a word Montanans say. He doesn't show up and hear from people. He doesn't understand that his policies impact everyday people in major, significant ways that harm them if they are done improperly. We need somebody who has seen what it is like to struggle as a family, being raised by a single parent. I have. I know how important it is that we get our policies right for everyday people.
Ms. Williams.
So as I talk to Montanans, a lot of them ask me, so are you a progressive or a moderate? And my response is always, yes. That's what we need. We need someone with a strong progressive advocacy and voting record that has stood up for women's health and non-discrimination and choice and all those things Democrats hold dear. And we need someone who has been honored by the Chamber of Commerce and can bring those skills to bear that's created jobs in Montana and over 170 new businesses. Thanks.
Mr. Meyer, Republicans have often criticized the Endangered Species Act, saying it increasingly is used to block or delay development in rural areas, and you've often used the act in legal action against the government. Is the act just fine the way it is, or is it being abused to stop development, as critics would argue?
The Endangered Species Act is just fine the way it is. I use the Endangered Species Act in court to stop development in places where I hunt, in places where my friends hunt. If we don't win these cases, all the trees come down, all the elk are gone. I can take Gianforte, Tester, whoever, to the places where the Forest Service wanted to cut down these trees, where I was full draw on a nice bull elk, and I would never have had that experience if that timber sale would have gone forward. So I think that the Endangered Species Act actually protects endangered species, it protects our public land, and it protects hunters as well.
Mr. Pettinato.
I served 9 years at the U.S. Department of Justice defending federal agencies. I was not particularly responsible for the Endangered Species Act, but I worked with my colleagues to defend those actions. And in all honesty, there are extremists on both sides. But the goal of the Endangered Species Act is one that I think we all stand up for. It stands for encouraging and retaining the biodiversity that we have here. And we need to find practical and pragmatic solutions to make sure that we implement it fairly and accurately.
Mr. Kier.
Look, we have endangered species in Montana and some of the best habitat in entire North America because we have generally had incredible land stewards in Montana, whether it's our native peoples or our farm and ranch families. And I have personally worked alongside a lot of conservative people to protect endangered species habitat using incentive-based tools. And in the work that we've done, whether it's been providing for the Sage Grouse Initiative or provisions through the Farm Bill, there are ample ways to work together with incentives so that we can promote businesses and protect endangered species in Montana.
Ms. Williams.
So a lot of my work with water in Montana was finding win-win-win solutions for really thorny natural resource issues, often involving a species that may have been put on the list, and we, through creative efforts, were able to keep it off, like the Yellowstone cutthroat trout, through in-stream flow deals, et cetera, up in the Yellowstone. I do think the ESA is great. It needs to work a little bit better for private landowners so they can contribute to it.
Mr. HEENAN.
Yeah, the Endangered Species Act was passed under a Republican administration. It's worked well for decades now. We all value our wilderness here in Montana, our public lands, and there really is something magical about encountering wildlife, and none of us want to see that go. The flip side of that, of course, is government creates red tape. That's their job. We need to be able to cut through the red tape and find local, community-based solutions to problems.
Mike?
Mr. Pettinato, you and all the candidates have talked about how you want to reduce and cut prescription drug costs, which has proven to be very difficult. I was wondering, what specifically do you have in mind that will do that, and how are you going to achieve it politically?
So when I worked with Brian Schweitzer in 2000, we took buses to Canada for cheaper prescription drugs. I don't know if you guys all remember that. I don't know, and I don't know if you've seen the latest, that the government right now is cracking down on Canadian pharmacies shipping those drugs into America. So those of you who are taking advantage of that, your time is limited. And so we need a new solution. Pharmaceutical prices are rising twice as fast as healthcare costs, and healthcare costs are rising twice as fast as wages. We need to use a market-based solution to fix this and restore the market. Right now, Congress says we're not going to import prescription drugs because we're afraid of counterfeits. Well, that's fine. That gives the pharmaceutical company a captive market. But what we can do is we don't have to move the drugs around. We have the internet. We look up all the prices for the pharmaceuticals in all the other developed countries, and we say, we pick the lowest one and we say, pharmaceutical companies, that's the most you can charge. It restores the market, it gets us out of this, and it pushes down on the prices.
Mr. Keir. Yeah, two things we can do. One, allow the federal government to negotiate drug prices. Right now, they're prohibited from doing that through Medicare. That's a huge and simple fix. The second that I think is a little more innovative is looking at our investments in science like venture capitalists would. And if we invest in initial science, we track that science downstream so that if companies are profiting from it, we have a stake in that profit, and we can control the price and make sure that proceeds go back into the coffers to help people have access to those drugs.
Ms. Williams?
For 5 months, we've been saying that Medicare should be able to bargain for drug costs just like the VA and Medicaid can now. So that's been a consistent portion of our healthcare promise, and we need to advance generics. Interestingly, when I was looking at the Trans-Pacific, the TPP, that actually would have squelched the ability to get generics. So we need to take on this industry and work to benefit Montanans, not their profits.
Mr. Heenan.
Yeah, we're paying outrageous prices for the same prescription medicine that people in other countries, they're paying 1/3, 1/4 as much as we as healthcare consumers are here. This also is a dark money issue. How come we can't get the same fair prices that other countries get? The reason is because politicians in Washington are bought and paid for by the most powerful lobby in existence right now, which is Big Pharma. We need to elect representatives with no strings attached that are willing to make good common sense decisions for consumers.
Mr. Meyer.
We do need to elect representatives that won't take money from the pharmaceutical industry. We also need to allow the import of pharmaceuticals from other countries.
Thank you.
Mr. Keir, Congressman Greg Gianforte and Senator Steve Daines have introduced bills to release nearly 700,000 acres of wilderness study areas in Montana from federal protection, and they argue that public lands should be returned to the people for public use. What's your stance on rolling back these protections?
They are available to the people for public use. I think this is a top-down approach that completely undermines an incredible amount of energy and effort that's gone into public process and community investment in these places. I will concede, and I've done some work on this, that there are probably a couple of sites within that long list that might make sense based on legal precedent and histories of those places to be released. But there are a lot of those places that communities have fought hard to maintain as established wilderness study areas. They're important to protect, and they should be. And I think the fact that our congressman failed to hold public hearings, failed to hold public town hall meetings in these communities that have been battling for these places to be protected for decades is really an affront to the public process and to, I think, what Montanans expect, which is access to their elected officials. Whether you agree with him or not, you deserve to see him and talk to him about the decision he's making from the top down.
Ms. Williams?
I agree. Resolution of wilderness study area futures is a good idea, but not legislating it from the top, from Washington, with the stroke of a pen. There are two bills, one's Forest Service related, one's BLM related, and the Forest Service one, there actually are two forest plan revisions going on right now where people are making a good faith effort to try and decide the future of those lands, and they should be given the chance, not slapped in the face.
Mr. Heenan?
Yeah, the process stinks. These are our public lands, all of ours, as taxpayers, as Montanans, as Americans, and yet all this was done behind closed doors. We had no opportunity to comment on how our public lands would be used. We were all rightly concerned when Representative Gianforte was elected, given his history and, frankly, animosity towards public lands. Now we're watching it play out in real time. That's why on May 10th, what we're going to do in Billings is do a town hall and let people talk about what they want to do.
Mr. Meyer?
It's important that we look at each wilderness study area on a case-by-case basis. It makes no sense to give it all away in one fell swoop. Montanans love our public land and we need to protect that. And if we are going to release any wilderness study areas, we need to look at that on a case-by-case scale and basis.
Mr. Pettinato?
When I served at the United States Department of Justice, I defended wilderness study areas. The courts used my interpretation of that act based on the cases that I defended. So when Daines and Gianforte go after that, it feels personal to me. Just to be clear, the statutes require the areas to stay basically as wild as they were back then. And just because the studies are done, it doesn't follow that you eliminate the protections. Those acts serve necessary purposes for ensuring that people have different areas where they can have the recreational experience they want.
As we run short on time, we'll go to the speed round, and we'll have a question directed to one candidate. Only that candidate will have 30 seconds to answer. Mike, you're first.
Yeah, Ms. Williams, immigration policy. Do we need to make it harder for immigrants to come to the U.S. or not?
We need strong borders. We need a compassionate immigration policy. We need to ensure that people that have helped us internationally, that have risked their lives to do that, have an opportunity to come here if they're not safe in their own countries. We need to ensure that there's a sufficient workforce for our agricultural community. There's a lot of things we need to take care of in our immigration policy.
Thank you, Beth.
Mr. Keir, a lot of areas in Montana are without adequate broadband service. I'm curious what federal policies you would pursue that would help make broadband more available to rural Montana.
Yeah, so I have called on a federal infrastructure package. I have spent a lot of my career assessing and measuring infrastructure. I think rural broadband is an incredibly important contribution to that package. And I think that also, frankly, just investing in water infrastructure is another fundamental need that a lot of our rural communities have. So an infrastructure package would be able to cover a lot of those things.
Thank you, Mike.
Mr. Heenan, what do you think is the acceptable minimum wage we should have, a federal minimum wage for the country?
Yeah, on a national level, I think we need to get towards a $15 an hour minimum wage. The reason for that is because anything less than that and you're having to rely on government subsistence. And so as I travel the state and talk to people, I don't hear from people, I wish I could get more government benefits. I hear from people, I wish that by working hard I could get ahead.
Beth, final question.
Mr. Pettinato, what steps are you supporting that would create more middle-class jobs in Montana and the nation? We're talking about jobs that pay a good wage and come with good benefits.
Unions. We need stronger unions. When capitalism works great to reduce prices for lots of things, and it works great for bricks and cars. It works less well when we talk about human capital. We can only push up on wages using three ways. We can increase the minimum wage, we can increase demand, which I think we can do in Montana with the wind in the trees, and the third way is unions. Shareholders already have a collective bargaining unit. We call it a corporation. Workers need one to fight back.
We are down to the final opportunity for you to tell Montanans candidates why you are the candidate that should be supported in this primary. Mr. Heenan, you have 60 seconds to start.
Yeah, I guess I bring a different background than everyone else on this stage. I sit across the table from people that have been abused by corporate bullies, and I work with them to fight for them, fight on their behalf, and I have a track record of winning. I have a track record of fighting for Montanans against dark money special interests and winning. If we're serious about draining the swamp, we need to elect somebody that's what they do professionally. And I think also, frankly, electability. As I mentioned, my wife and I own a restaurant. We have a small business background. I'm in Yellowstone County. I've built the infrastructure to win in November, including I'm the only candidate with a statewide field program, and I've got a strategist that helped Doug Jones beat Roy Moore in Alabama. So we've got the pieces in place to win in November. But of course, I need everybody's vote and support here in June so that I can take on and defeat Greg Gianforte and return to Montana a representative that is willing and capable and wants to represent all Montanans.
Mr. Meyer.
My name is John Meyer. I'm the first person in my family to graduate from a four-year college. After getting a degree in biology and Spanish from the University of Montana, I began working for the Flathead National Forest. After that, I went to law school. Now I'm a public lands attorney. I like to hike, I like to hunt, I like to ski, I like to mountain bike, I like to climb on public lands. I would really appreciate your vote June 5th.
Mr. Pettinato.
Montana Democrats, we have an opportunity to take this seat from Greg Gianforte and to take Montana values back to Washington. At the same time, we have a challenge in front of us. Not since 2008 have we picked a candidate in a primary, in a seriously contested statewide primary, who has defeated the Republican. I'm the only one on stage who can beat Greg Gianforte. Indeed, I'm the only one born and raised in Montana. I love Montana, and that's why I'm here fighting for you. I've defeated wealthy interests before. Just last year, I defeated Donald Trump's firm's lawyers to save taxpayers $1.5 billion. My experiences have shown me more opportunities for Montana. With the wind in the trees, we can bring more jobs to rural areas and more money to Montana than Gianforte ever dreamed. We can expand freedom and build Montana for the future. We can push back against the toxic politics coming out of Washington, and we can restore civility to Montana's seat. If you want to beat Gianforte, vote for me, and together we will send the body slammer packing.
Mr. Keir.
I'm not an attorney, and I'm not a career politician, but I am a scientist, and I think that we need evidence-based decision-making and facts to cut through partisan rhetoric today. I'm also somebody who understands the struggles of everyday families. I was raised by a single mom. When my dad walked out the door and I was 6 months old, she raised my brother and I on her own. And I remember moments when my mom cried at the kitchen table because she didn't know if she could buy groceries and still pay rent. Those are things that stick with you for a lifetime. And when you understand how families are impacted by everyday issues and by the policies in Washington, it is easy to commit yourself to a life of service to make sure that the policies that come from DC reflect Montana values, reflect Montana's needs. I've done that work across the rural and urban divide, working to help other people succeed in my efforts. I think I have a proven track record that I can deliver for Montana and DC, make people's lives better here, and I'm asking for everyone to vote for me in this June 5th primary so that I'll have a chance to do that. Thank you.
Ms. Williams.
So I'm tired of losing this seat. It's going to take a very unique Democrat to be able to win in a state that went 20 points for Trump. Look at the ones that have won. Tester, legislative experience, middle of the road, problem solver, roll up the sleeves. Same with Bullock. So what we need is a strong progressive advocacy and voting record, honored by the Chamber of Commerce, strong agricultural connections, and then success passing legislation in a hyper-partisan, divisive, inexperienced, minority environment, exactly what Congress is, but on steroids. I think we need someone who can get things done. I think we need someone who's both a fighter but also a fixer, that has a record of finding long-term solutions to thorny issues, working across a lot of stakeholder interests. And it's been 102 years since we first elected a woman to this seat, and it's time Jeanette had a successor.
With these final statements, we conclude this program and the second of our two primary candidate programs. On behalf of the trustees of the Greater Montana Foundation, I want to thank each and every person who has watched either on live stream, broadcast, or here with us in the studio. We hope that these programs have been valuable to you. We hope that we've contributed to the education and the information that voters need in the coming primary election. Also, on behalf of the Greater Montana Foundation, I want to thank our questioners, Beth and Mike, and our moderator, Ron. And I also want to thank the candidates especially, who've done a great job tonight at explaining their positions and their differences. We also have special appreciation tonight for all of those who have helped us make these programs possible, including the staff of the Montana Historical Society and Studio 19 Productions. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, I'll come over. Hey, Kev, are you still running your clock? Yes. Okay. Here.
Oh, I got it. Thank you.
This time, after I heard 4-inch heel, I thought I'd nice to meet you. Real pleasure. You're a good man. Thanks for returning it.
Nice to meet both of you. Good to meet you. Thanks.
1 minute. Little rug burn, I'll be okay.
Seriously, are you all right?
Yeah,
I thought I heard something crack. I did too.
That was the point that came.
Oh, okay. You could have ripped out all of our sound.
That's why we tape it down.
Thanks for coming and joining us. Good luck.
Thanks. Nice to meet you. Good luck.
We're going to do a little wrap up for Taylor now. Okay, Northern Broadcasting.
15 seconds.
And welcome back to the Craney Studio at the Montana Historical Society here on the Northern Broadcasting System. We hope you've enjoyed tonight's debate with the Democratic candidates who would like to be your representative in the upcoming election against Greg Gianforte for U.S. Congress. Joining me here on the wrap-up is Bill Whitson. I almost said Dr. Bill Whitson. I should have. He is the chairman of the board of the Greater Montana Foundation, who's put on the last 2 weeks of debates. And Bill, first, what do you think about the debates, and did they fulfill the need that the state of Montana was? Everybody's saying there's no debates, there's no discussion. Do you feel you filled that void with these?
Well, I'm going to answer that question, Ron, in a strong affirmative. But first, I want to thank you in particular as our vice chairman and a seasoned broadcaster for really making the programs the success they were. But yes, I think, the Greater Montana Foundation and our mission that